Good day everyone, and now we will start our module number 5 for 4th quarter. We have a different learning competency which is all about reacting on lay value judgment on critical issues that demand sound analysis and call for prompt actions. So we should always use this spelling of judgment. Though the judgment with letter E, it is used by other country, but what the Philippines is using is this one without E. So we will start on page number 1, and we have to state first our objectives. The first one will be to analyze the critical issues in a news article and from the illustrations. Second, identify the value judgment of people in the presented critical issues, and lastly we have to give positive and negative effects of a critical issue presented in illustrations or situation. So in what I know, you will read the news article below and give the details based on what is being asked. Choose and write the letter of the correct answer in a separate sheet of paper. So it's a news article, and it has a headline which is DENR leads inspection of sanitary landfill in Bulacan. So we have the lead, City of Malolos, Bulacan, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, DENR, on Friday led the inspection of an engineered sanitary landfill in North Zagaray town, this province, following reports of alleged violation of environmental laws. So in lead, we should always see or answer the WH questions because it is one sentence only, but it will be so meaty that once you read it, you will identify the setting, the time, the subject, and all. So that is the characteristic of a lead. So we can observe that here we use present tense of verb, leads, while we use here past tense. All of this happened before, but in writing news article, we are always using present tense of verb, no matter if it was happened before. However, if it is not happening, you will use infinitives like to lead, to start, like that. But if it is happened, or if it happened before, you will still use the present tense. So after reading that, you will answer this up until here. So for what's in our previous lesson, you learned how to judge the relevance and worth of ideas, soundness of authors' reasoning, and the effectiveness of the presentation. You also learned to analyze literary text and how to express opinion. In this module, you will analyze a critical issue and give its positive and negative effect using your sound analysis. So we have here the illustration. So you will give your own opinion by answering the questions here. So we have 5 questions. Is the action of the boy proper and correct? Then obviously, we can really see in illustration that it's not. Then you will have to explain also. Using the answer number 1, why do you say so? Explain why the boy's action is correct or wrong. If you were the boy, would you do the same thing as he did? Why? If you will see someone throwing garbage anywhere, what would you do? What will you say? Like that. In number 1, you can answer, if it's not proper and incorrect, then what is that thing? Or what is that action? In number 2, you will explain why did you say that it is improper, or why did you say that it is proper? So for what's new, read the news bit below and try to give the answer to the questions that follow. One of the articles circulating on social media claimed that garlic cured coronavirus. According to some claimants, of this said that this can lower the effects of the said disease. Is the news factual and correct? What is your basis in identifying if it is factual or fake news? How do you identify the real news from fake news? So like what I have said, or what I have discussed in previous lesson, in previous video lessons, we should always evaluate first before we believe. We should look for the credible sources, for valid information. For our discussion, which is all about reacting on lay value judgment on critical issues that demand sound analysis and call for prompt actions, we are facing a world of fast-paced technology where we can see and hear information and viewpoints, and we are not sure if there is truthfulness or not in everything we read or heard. So in choosing what we read, we must analyze the thing that we see and check if it is true or not. So we need to analyze the information objectively and make a reasoned judgment or sound analysis. So we should be critical thinkers. We should always not depend on what we believe, but we should open ourselves for what is really true, what is really valid and credible. So remember to think critically and analyze the issue thoroughly. So we should always not jump into conclusion immediately, but we have to see different views. We should always open to the different sides of the stories before we make an opinion. For example, a photo of a well-respected celebrity went viral for her revealing swimsuit attire during a family gathering. Remember that it's a family gathering, so it's somehow intimate. But well-respected celebrity revealing swimsuit. So you should always be open-minded. Is the photo being posted original and not edited? That's one thing. How and where did your friend get the picture? Is the originated source where the picture was taken legal and safe? Is the photo appropriate to the occasion? Why or why not? So you should always consider different things before you go to a conclusion. Maybe you have different mindset from the well-respected celebrity, but you should also consider that we are all different. We have different situations, and we should always be open from different sides of the story, and we shouldn't be biased for what we believe in. Your answers to the given questions, for example 1, made you think critically and directed you to an analytically judge the presented situation. If the viewer's thinks on the celebrity's attire is suited for the occasions, then the viewer made a positive judgment. If the viewer believes that the photo is malicious, then it's a negative judgment. It's very easy. If it's a positive feedback, positive judgment. If it's negative feedback, negative judgment. Number 2, you heard the earthquake hit Malolo City, but because you were not able to listen from a radio or watch a television, you just called a friend living there and verified if it's really true. Is the action in the situation correct? Why or why not? What the other action can be done aside from calling a friend? Likewise, we can discriminate between useful and less useful details in solving a problem or in making decision. Once we give a decision, there should be a perception of what is right from what is wrong. And this falls under fair judgment and unbiased opinion. This is the time that we make a sound analysis based on the ideas presented to us. So in example number 2, it is always depend on whom we call. If we really trust that person, then we can believe to him, and we can also have an update what happened and blah blah blah. So, but we should not also create things that will just bring panic to us. So we should always be mindful for the things we heard, listened, watched, read, or anything that you have acquired. But we have to be mindful and critical individual before we truly believe, and not to be under control out of emotion. So we have here the 7 signs of having good judgment. So the first one is the orientation. People with good judgment know how to orient themselves before making any decision. They know where they have been and where they are going. So when you say orientation, you have to make yourself oriented of different situations. You will not come across with only single situation, with only single belief. So you have to be open-minded. You have to orient yourself to hear, to listen, and to adopt different perspectives in life. Number 2, information. People with good judgment know how to gather information from different sources. They do not entertain negative and false information. So when we say information, it's very vital. Why will you make a judgment without any further information? And if you will only base for one source, which is not really strong, then you are not really having a good judgment. We have to have good sources, especially if those sources are strong. More sources, more strong sources, the more we can make good judgment. Deliberation. After getting the information, people tend to think systematically and thoroughly. If this information is factual, then answer the questions that may arise without being biased. So deliberation meaning, after gathering the information from different sources, we have to know first and evaluate if they are really true or not. Because if we will just believe, then we will not make a good judgment. Good judgment is from a critical analysis. And deliberation is very useful for us to examine what is factual, what is not. Decision. So before we give our decision, we need to take things in balance because every decision has its own consequences. We need to know if the action is right or wrong. So decision, after analyzing the information, so we should make a decision if we will believe or not. However, in every decision, there will be always enough consequence because we made an action. And an action is followed by a consequence. So we should always prepare. And that's part of orientation. You have to orient yourself that no matter what you have decided, there is always a feedback. Maybe it's negative, positive, but you always orient yourself to become prepared. Then 5, action. After making a decision, after deciding if you will believe or not, then you will make an action. For example, you decided to agree, then you will make an action that will be related to your decision. Because after the decision is made, people do not need to ignore the choices they have. They need to face the thing that would happen after deciding on one thing. They need to be responsible for every action they made. So in action, after deciding, you really decided, then therefore you have to make an action. Maybe you can also make a composition, a text that you will prove your own judgment. So evaluation, once the action is done, it's time to know whether the action and the decision jive with each other. A person with good judgment will always do the right thing based on sound analysis. So evaluation, so because of you will analyze, you will evaluate because there is something which is done already. After that, what is the feeling? What do you think? Is your action right or not? Is your decision right or not? So whatever the result is, you should always be prepared of the consequences. And after evaluating it, if you think that your first decision is right, you have to go to the next one, which you think will correct your wrong decision. Then so we have the recapitulation. People with good judgment always learn from their mistakes. They always sum up what is essential and what should be kept. Let us use the saying made by the man of good judgment, Benjamin Franklin. His sayings are, first drive your business or it will drive you. So you should have, because in the orientation part, you always have to orient yourself for being corrected or being praised. It's either of the two. Because if you are wrong, you will be corrected, and you should be open with that. So you should always drive your own business. You should always drive yourself. No matter the results are, still stick with your goal. Never decide when you are angry or sad. It's very, very important not to become too affected with your emotions. So you should calm yourself first before jumping to a decision. An investment in knowledge pays the best dividend. Meaning, you should always know first before going to the next one. Because if you do not know it, you cannot say something. Less talk, less mistake, like that. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So you should always include yourself in the learning. Not only you will just say and say and say, but you did not experience what really happened. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So you should always prepare first. The orientation, blah, blah, blah. You should always not jump to the conclusion immediately. You have to do certain steps before making a good judgment. Well done is better than well said. So actions speak louder than words. Always put that idea into your mind. Because if you are corrected, if you are wrong, then you should be corrected. And you will not only say that I am wrong, but you should do something to correct yourself. Who is wise? The person who learns from everyone. So you should not always limit yourself with the things that you think that it's right. It's the only right thing. But you should always be open to other ideas, other situations, because it will give you learning. If you will travel, if you will go to different sides of life. So ways on how to improve personal judgment: be aware of personal bias. Do not base on what you think is right. For example, your favorite personality said about something, then you will just simply believe because that is your favorite personality. So you should always set aside your bias and be open with the reality. Consider opposite points of view. It's very important, like what my professor said during my college days. A government without contrary, for example, a vice president is always agreeing with the president, you will not see the positive and the negative side. Then the positive side of having the opposite points of view, we tend to extend our horizons, our viewpoints. Because if we will see the negativities of everything, then we will also see the positive of a particular thing. So we should always open to see the opposite side, because knowing the opposite sides will have the best decision. No one's action and decision. So if you have decision, put it into action. Then if your action made you to realize something, then proceed to another decision, then action again. Learn from experiences. Do not hesitate. Try and try until you succeed. It's very common, but we can apply it during making a good judgment. Do not bring past actions, because everything is changing and the situation is not always the same as what happened before. So we should always look for new and do not be stuck with what happened before. Be critical thinker. So we should not base us only for what we read, but we should always see the sources, the relevance the connection of all the ideas presented before we jump into judgment. So for what's more, we will have here match the illustration in each number found in column A to its corresponding issue in column B. For example, this illustration, do you think it is all about domestic violence, air pollution, teenage pregnancy, hunger, drug addiction? So you will just match the illustration from the choices from column B. So you will just write the letter on your answer sheet. Read the situation each number and choose if the action is right or wrong. So it's very easy. If you think it's right and not hurting other people, then you will put a check mark. Then if you think that it is not following the rules, the laws, and it's hurting people, it's degrading others' feeling, then you will put a cross mark. Then for activity 2, analyze each situation and identify if the prompt action is based on sound analysis. Meaning of sound analysis, you are really making steps before jumping to conclusion, to good judgment. Then put a heart on the space provided if a good decision was made. But if it's not good, leave it blank. Sorry. So if you think, for example, majority of families experience hunger, so barangay officials created a program to alleviate hunger in their community. If that action by barangay is really a good one to solve the majority of families, to solve the hunger from them, then you will put a heart. And if you think that it is not good decision, not good action of barangay officials, then you will leave it blank. Then for independent assessment 2, analyze the situation below, then write one possible action for each. You have found a lost money, what will you do? The missing boy is found in the court of the barangay, what will you do? Even one sentence will do, as long as it is really suited to the situation. Identify the possible consequence of each action. The boy decides to keep the plastic bag containing prohibited drugs. So like this one. Here, what will you do? In activity number 3, you will tell what will happen next if that situation will happen. Or what will happen to the boy if he continuously keep the plastic bag containing prohibited drugs. So what is the consequence? So for independent assessment 3, give the positive and negative effect of illustration. For example, this one, it's like the houses are burning. What's the positive effect, negative effect? So you always have maybe the positive, it might be difficult, but there is always positive. Like what Miss Catriona said, silver lining. We should always look at the positive side. Maybe there is a reason why those things are happening. Positive effect, negative effect. So the things I learned are, what did you learn? That how we should be a critical thinker, a critical reader nowadays. What did you realize? For example, if you will not be a critical one, what will happen to you? So real life situation for what I can do. Suppose that you were a student who witnessed bullying in your school. You had seen the transferred student is being mocked by your classmates. You told your teacher what happened and they were reprimanded. But on the next day, you saw the bullied student quarreling with your classmate. Do you think what he did is right? Explain your answer in not less than 5 sentences. So, what will you do? Is that student who witnessed the bullying, do you think what he did is right or not? Then explain. Or you can also include, if you in the shoe of that witness, what will you do? So in assessment, we have news article, Bulacan town starts sending trash to nearby. provinces. So after that, you will answer this. Up until number 15. The last part, the additional activity, analyze the illustration, answer the questions, and be guided with the rubrics below. So it is this. Maybe they are having conflicts, they are having misunderstanding. What is the critical issue presented in the illustration? Explain how each person reacted to the given situation. Do you think their reaction is sound decision? Why or why not? So the focus, if you really address the situation, what do you think is the critical issue? The content, expression of thoughts. So if you think your focus, you should always know what it's all about. And the content is the sound decision is right for both sides. Expression of thought, on meaning how you clearly explained their sides, what you think is right before making a judgment or not. So you can answer that even 2 to 3 sentences because it's part of your performance. Excuse me. So I hope you learned something from module number 5. Do not give judgment easily or right away, but we have always to consider different sides, different stories before we jump to the conclusion. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what we saw, it's not about what we heard, it's not about what we listened, but we should always look to the side of others. Because if we will feel their situation, maybe we will think differently. And in our daily living, we should adapt it. We should not say, do anything to other people which we think that will be the reason of being degraded, being hurt. Golden rule, do not do unto others what you don't want others do unto you. God bless and stay safe.